of Republicans. He was completely shunned by the Democrats, as well they should. Tony Lee, what is the challenge to the Black church in this moment in time? We got you on mute. Now we got you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the challenge, Roland, for us, the Black church, is to remember where our power comes from. I think so often that we forget that we've seen this kind of thing before, whether it's in our community, whether it's even in Scripture, that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego dealt with a king who set up a big golden statue of himself. Seems like similar to Trump, and that ad about Gaza, this gold statue. But they understood and told the king they would not bow down. But they did it collectively. They did it in solidarity with each other. And I think that we need to remember that just because somebody has position doesn't mean they have power. That Bull Connor had position, but our folks had power. And they had the kind of power that now relegates Bull Connor to seem to just be an antagonist in our victory story. But yet, in the midst of it all, that we had the power to be able to get past Bull Connor. That's what we've got to remember. We've got to remind folks that we have the power. And remember, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into a fiery furnace, 3 of them. But King Nebuchadnezzar looked up into the furnace and said, I threw in 3, but now it looks like 4, because he didn't realize they had a power source and that God was with them. And we've got to remind folks that we fight because we know that we don't fight by ourselves, but we fight because God is on our side.
Folks, as Pastor Lee was talking, the Republicans were praising their God, Donald Trump. You see how they still are clapping for him. You see on the Democratic side, they are silent. No one is clapping at all. And you know, so you see the smug look of the twice impeached, criminally convicted felon in chief. This is what we expected, Dr. Greg Carr. And in a moment, he's about to speak, but we're going to go live to Bishop William Barber, who's in our studio. Just Greg, just real quick, just share your thoughts before this thug speaks.
Empires fall. The United States was never going to be here forever, and this is just accelerating the inevitable. In terms of domestic policy, what he's going to say tonight about his boss, Putin, what he's going to say about tariffs in a world that will now be truly multipolar, should scare the hell out of everyone. Domestically, white nationalism has always been at the center of this. I have to disagree with my friend Janai Nelson on this. The Constitution is no guarantee of anything. In fact, it will protect white nationalism, to read Ron Walters correctly. So tonight, when he starts talking about the things that he did to make America better in the 6 weeks, firing all these people, we saw as we were on our way over here that Elon Musk said that he should pardon Derek Chauvin. This is white nationalism.
Right.
And so our fight, which you're showing tonight on the Black Star Network, as these numbers soar, as we get ready to hear Reverend Barber, that 24-hour thing that was done today, folks gathering, that was very important. What's more important, however, is Black-owned independent media, because the Black church, the Black institutions, and this Black network now must decide if Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said they ain't bound down to the king, what the hell are Black people going to do in the criminal enterprise called United States of America? We are not fundamentally Americans to these people, and this is our time to prove it to ourselves and to them.
Well, it's only perfect that we start with Reverend Barber right now. Donald Trump is speaking, and literally, just as you finished, Greg, we hit the 200,000.
Oh.
Folks who are watching us live.
Let's double it.
And so, folks, we're going to have clips after this here. But we think it's important for you to hear the state of our union from Bishop William Barber, one of the leaders of Moral Mondays, of course, a co-convener of Pairs of the Breach, Poor People's Campaign. He has a word for us. He has a direction for us. And so let's right now hear from Bishop William Barber.
Thank God for all of you who have gathered here tonight, and thank Roland for calling us and assembling us and pulling us together in community where more than 200,000 people have joined, and that number is continuing and continuing to grow. The assignment tonight is to wrestle with what is the state of our union. St. Augustine of Hippo out of Africa once said that wherever people say, or whenever people say the times are evil, the times are evil, it is essential to remember that we are our times. Or as James Baldwin said it so clearly, responsibility can be abdicated, but it cannot be lost. As long as we claim to have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, then we, the people, have a responsibility to guard our union. And we would be wise to begin by remembering what binds us together, though imperfectly, but remember what binds us together. Our ancient religious traditions teach us that love, justice, and mercy are the responsibilities not just of individuals, but of governments. In fact, Isaiah chapter 10 says, "Woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor and women and children of their right." It is a terrible thing to open the Congress, for instance, with prayer and pray, P-R-A-Y, and then go forth to pass policies that P-R-E-Y, prey on the very people that God cares about the most: the poor, the widows, the children, those who've been pushed to the margins. One of our own prophets reminded us that Amos prophesied in God's name, "Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream." But if you read back up in Amos 5, that same text, those rivers of justice only roll down when a remnant of people come together and cry out in the streets, shut down the malls and everything, and declare, "Not on our watch." God says that when a remnant comes together that says, "Not on our watch, not now," then God says, "I will visit you and help you," and then justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Jesus was clear that nations, not just individuals, but nations, Roland, will be judged by how we treat the hungry, the thirsty, the naked, the stranger, and the least of these. Nations would be judged, not just individuals. And we can never forget that. We can never forget that nations will be judged, not just in some hereafter, but even now, nations will be judged, because how we treat the vulnerable is how we treat God. There is no way to declare, "In God we trust," but then the vulnerable cannot trust us with power or trust us with the realities of our government. Not only our moral traditions, but what Abraham Lincoln called our ancient faith, but also the commitments of our founding documents. Dr. King would never throw these documents away. He once said to America, "If I was in some other country, I might not protest like I do, but I protest here because you had the nerve to put it in writing and write it down on paper." The Declaration, for instance, of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all persons, all men, are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I see my dear lawyer friend in the house tonight, and she'll tell you that there's something else in that Declaration of Independence. It says that when there has been a long train of abuses, it is the duty, it is the responsibility of the people to rise up and to change that form of government. Our Constitution says, "We the people," in order to form a more perfect union. Right there, our own Constitution confesses that we are imperfect and argues, that we have work to do. And part of that work is to establish justice, to provide for the common defense, to ensure domestic tranquility, and to promote the general welfare. Yes, welfare is in the founding principles of our nation and of this Constitution. Now, these words from both Scripture and our founding documents set a high standard for what any nation, particularly this nation, should be about. And when we hold the state of our current union over against this standard, we all must confess that our union in the hand of Trump and Musk, or Musk and Trump, and the current congressional leadership is pretty low down. It does not reach the high standard to which we are called. It falls far below the call of love and justice and mercy. It is far below the government of the people, by the people, and for the people that Abraham Lincoln called us to preserve. It is far beneath what even Franklin Delano Roosevelt proposed. Once Franklin Delano proposed, Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, in these days of difficulty, we Americans everywhere must and shall choose the path of social justice, the path of faith, the path of hope, the path of love toward our fellow man. Then he said on another occasion, 1937, I see 1/3 of the nation ill-housed, ill-clad, and ill-nourished. And the test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. And the global vision of peace that so many from this nation fought for, what we're seeing now is far below that. What we're seeing now is low down. It's far beneath the vision that Dr. King articulated when he stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and told the nation about his dream for full realization of the promise of this nation and that has been made for every one of us. And remember, at the March on Washington, it wasn't just about the dream. It was about living wages, about education and voting rights and labor rights. Or remember when he preached and said, a country's true greatness is not measured by its material achievements like tall buildings, but by how it values and remembers its justice and equality. And it seems, he said, one time in the sermon, he said, it seems as though this morning that I can hear God speaking. And I can hear him speaking throughout the universe saying, be still and know that I am God. In America, if you don't stop, if you don't straighten up, if you don't stop exploiting people, I'm going to rise up and break the backbone of your power. The dark vision being followed by this administration is far beneath those lofty visions I just spoke of. And instead, they are rooted in some immoral ideas. And this dark vision demands that we embrace the call of the hymnist who taught us to sing in the second verse of one of our national hymns, America, America, God mend thine every flaw. God in this moment keeps trying to tell us something. Tell even this administration something. Think about it. The inauguration falling on the day that we remembered the prophetic work and voice of Dr. King was, I believe, a warning, a first warning. America, don't let the nation go down this path without being maladjusted to the unjust and evil actions, the greedy and love of money actions, the power actions that forget the people. And now tonight, I think, is another warning. Again, the first State of the Union is on the night before Ash Wednesday. A day when is a call for repentance. And I hear the Spirit saying again to the nation and to the current leadership, repent, yes, repent. And I hear it saying to us, stand against it, resist what you see happening. Repent of what you see driving this administration's effort. Their immoral philosophy can kind of be summed up in 8 statements. The first thing we see happening that we have to resist is the deliberate attempt to use executive orders as a way to intentionally violate the Constitution, thereby creating enough confusion to distract the people from what's really going on in the Congress that does have the weight of law. See, an executive order, family, doesn't have the weight of law. It can be overturned. But what the Congress passes can't be done that way. And there is some sense, Bannon has said it in a video, he said, we told the president to create 100 days of thunder. Do everything, do anything you want to do, so that while people are distracted, we can be working on undermining the so-called administrative state and putting things in place in the Congress. Secondly, we are seeing their philosophy is the tyranny of technology and the dehumanization of people. The third thing we are seeing is the attempt to make people justify their existence, which has its roots in racism and apartheid and slavery and fascism. You know, when you were in slavery, you had to justify your existence. You had to have a piece of paper. Apartheid, piece of paper. When the Nazis had a piece of paper, now someone with a computer sends a note over and says, prove to me that you're there. That is a dangerous philosophy to be pushing throughout this democracy. And then the fourth immoral philosophy is the denial of equality on every front. And the fifth one is the outright violation of freedom of speech, due process in the law, the attempt to undermine equal protection under the law for all persons. The 14th Amendment is what saved this country. Had not been for the 14th Amendment, you would not see you would not have seen the progress that we have today. And anybody that messes with the 14th Amendment is literally trying to rebirth the country, but not in a good way, but in an unrighteous way. Birthright citizenship was the hallmark. If it wasn't had for birthright citizenship, many of the slaves would have never been able to be citizens because their parents were born in Africa before they were snatched away. The sixth thing that we see is the outright betrayal of liberty. The seventh thing, Roland, we see is the idolatry of certainty, of the certainty of white supremacy. White supremacy operates on the premise that we are certain y'all are different. We are certain that we are better. We are certain that some folk matter and others don't. And the idolatry of certainty is one of the worst sins you can ever commit. To suggest that you are certain that somebody else is not created in the image of God like you. And when you begin to implement that into policy, it is dangerous. And then the eighth thing is the misuse of religious Christian nationalism in an attempt to falsely claim that their immoral actions are moral. To take religion and twist it to make right wrong and wrong right. And that's why tomorrow morning, with fellow clergy and moral leaders from all of this nation's many traditions, we are gathering here in D.C. tomorrow with full vestments and standing in the prophetic tradition with heavy hearts, but also with committed spirits, determined to go into the Capitol, into the Rotunda. I don't know what's going to happen, don't know how they're going to respond, but we tend to go to every congressional office to say, you're wrong. Repent, because we hear the call of God and bear the sorrow of the souls in our care who are worried about their country. We're not coming together as Republicans or Democrats, but as faith leaders who know from our work in communities that our common life depends on our shared moral commitments. We are coming to issue a call for repentance and truth-telling, because our political leaders in this current administration have betrayed our most basic moral commitments. And it's not just a momentary betrayal, it's a betrayal every day. Someone asked me the question the other day, what do you do when you have an administration in office that violates what God hates every day? You look at the 6 things that God hates: a proud look, shedding innocent blood, lying, stirring up the community. Every day, what do? We come from many traditions, but we are united by the moral proposition that Abraham Lincoln called our ancient faith and the conviction that all people share an equality. In the face of a tyrannical king who refused to hear the positions of his subjects, this moral conviction that we are created equal and endowed with undeniable rights united our nation in its Declaration of Independence. When the tyranny of chattel slavery, not just slavery, but chattel slavery, threatened to destroy our nation, this moral commitment to equality and freedom sustained a long and painful struggle to not only preserve our union, but also to reconstruct it by guaranteeing equal protection under law. when the tyranny of white supremacy reasserted itself under the guise of separate but equal was constitutional. A moral movement of everyday people tapped the power of nonviolence to compel the nation once again to face the truth about equality and freedom and repent of the ways that it had been betrayed. We have struggled to realize a republic committed to equality and freedom in all. We've never finished the struggle. We're yet struggling, but we've made some headway. But these moral commitments have united us as a people. It's not been a perfect world. The moral commitments that we as Black people and other people have committed to justice has inspired a global community. It's amazing how "We Shall Overcome" has been sung from Alabama to Tiananmen Square. Now, many of these values are recognized as universal human rights as a basis for shared peace. However, the moral failure of our political leaders threatens all of this in a way that has been unseen in recent history. Walk with me now. They have the power, because of the apathy of those who think this is just an anomaly that will easily pass. They have the power because of the absurd abdication of responsibility by those who say nothing can be done. We cannot follow this apathy or this absurd abdication. We have to take action. We have to be advancing. We have to be fully aware. This must be our attitude. Now we must answer the call for full resistance. We are daring to say to America and the current leadership, you cannot hide behind false notions of exceptionalism and perfection. No, you must confess and repent, and if you won't tell it, then we will. That we have become subject in some ways to the tyranny of technology. That tyranny of technology awed by the possibilities of progress and the promise of limited growth. You know, Musk said on a CNN interview that he expected by 2035 all jobs to be replaced by computers and smart engines. Our political leaders in this group have allowed corporate power to go unchecked for decades. This is how we got here. Our courts have ruled that corporations should be treated like people and people should be treated like things. In the richest nation in the history of the world, poverty has become epidemic as the fourth leading cause of death. 800 people dying a day from poverty right here in America. Even though we know what could be done and to end this death-dealing poverty, and we have the means to do it, we have allowed extreme inequality to foster and fester like a sore, like a raisin in the sun in our common life. And then this false populism has emerged in response to pit us against one another across dozens of dividing lines. But we must not be divided, because this is a crisis not of just democracy. This, my friends, is a crisis of civilization that is being orchestrated to tear apart democracy forever. Bannon said in one of his interviews recently, and I'll make sure that Roland puts it up if he's not already shown it, we want 100 days of thunder to allow them to do what they want, to take America to the golden age. Bannon said that this is war, all-out war. He said that their plan was to target 4,000 federal jobs, specifically, just like they targeted 2,900 precincts in the election, to target 4,000 federal jobs, because those 4,000 federal jobs control the other 10 million. And that 10 million controls a $5.5 trillion budget, and that budget is connected to $75 trillion in assets. My friends, they're not playing. This is not a time just for cute bumper sticker protest. Our faith traditions and moral traditions provide a firm foundation upon which to stand against the divide and conquer strategies of these extremists. In this moment, like never before, we must believe in a moral agenda that stands against systemic racism, labor exploitation, poverty, xenophobia, and any attempt to promote hate toward any members of the human family. We must be openly and deeply disturbed by the Trump, Musk, Johnson Republican agenda and never separate them. They're all one for all and all for one. This is their focus on cutting programs for the poor to give tax cuts to the wealthy and big corporations and more money for the war machine and mass deportation. And we must tell the truth about what's going on, because you cannot organize a movement without an analysis. You have to have an analysis. You have to know what the real truth is, what the battle lines are. It's truth-telling time. And truth-telling in a time of lies is one of the most radical forms of nonviolent action and civil disobedience known to humanity. Only the truth can set us free. We say our people are afraid, but we must do the analysis to understand why they're afraid and what's causing their fear and what will remove their fear. We must tell the truth until everybody knows. For instance, Elon Musk, connected to South Africa, the unelected head of the new Department of Government Efficiency, announced in January that he aims to cut $2 trillion in spending, or 30% of the current federal budget. Tonight, as I walk through, I'm gonna focus specifically on the budget, because one of the things you have to come to understand is that these people do not run for office to give out keys to the cities and certificates. When they run for office, they are running to write statutes and to control the money. That's their purpose. And so he wants 30% of the current federal budget, but without major cuts to the Pentagon and war spending or defaulting on interest payment. We must tell the truth, Barbara, that such drastic slashing would be mathematically impossible without gutting vital programs, such as Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. Every time you hear them say, we want to cut $2 trillion, you must understand that is mathematically impossible without gutting programs like Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare. We must tell the truth that while Republican leaders of the House and Senate haven't come to a consensus yet on the specifics of their tax spending plan, the Republicans in the House are aiming for what they call one big, beautiful bill that would make $2 trillion in cuts over 10 years. Now, you know what happens about 10 years from now is when the demographics shift in this country. And you no longer have a majority white country. First time in Western Hemisphere, when the folk that were brought here as former slaves and the people who were brought here to work from Mexico and other Latin American places, and black folk from Haiti and from Africa, those people brought in will become the majority. In South Africa, they were always the majority. But we've never seen this, where those who were the slaves and those who were the workers become the majority of the country that enslaved them. And that country have the greatest gross domestic product in the world. They say they want this budget 10 years, $2 trillion. And the programs that are likely to be targeted include, let me tell the truth, first of all, in Medicaid. This is what the State of the Union is about. You need to know in Medicaid, the Republicans are considering changes that would shift billions in Medicaid costs to states that take it coverage away from millions of people. The House budget alone, my brothers and sisters, calls for $880 billion in cuts over 10 years. Medicaid is a joint federal program and state and federal program that gives health coverage to low-income people. Now, there are 140 million poor and low-wage people in this country. 60% of black people are poor and low wage, that's 26 million. 30% of white people are poor and low wage, that's 66 million. So when they're gonna cut Medicaid, that provides health coverage to low-income people, that means that cut is going to come straight down the heart of the Black community. As of October 2024, more than 72 million people were enrolled in Medicaid. 72 million, excuse me. Another 7 million were enrolled in CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance Program. And somebody told me one day when I was sharing this, when they said, Reverend, that's boring. I said, that's your problem. People with evil intent operate in the boredom. They bet on you not paying attention to the numbers so that you really don't know and understand what's going on. Some of the proposals for cuts in Medicaid could result in the loss of coverage for 36 million people. We must tell the truth. Now what this means, in 2023, 39.5% of the total Medicaid enrollees were white. 18.5% were Black. 29% were Latinx, and 4.7% were Asian. And the rest were Native or multiple races. More than 7 million older Americans and 10 million people with disabilities also rely on Medicaid. So when you talk about cutting Medicaid, you're talking about cutting the heart out of coverage for poor and low-income people, and particularly cutting the heart out of the Black community. More than 60% of nursing home residents rely on Medicaid. Y'all think about grandma and them right now, and auntie and them right now. This is what they're talking about cutting. Drastic cuts to Medicaid would reduce care and coverage. It would also close healthcare facilities, particularly the ones in the rural areas, and particularly those in the southern rural areas, where the majority of Black people that are poor live in the South, and 1/3 of all poor white folk live in the South. We must tell the truth. We must tell the truth. Boston University Medicaid experts have stated that deep cuts would be catastrophic for patients. And we know what we've always said: when the rest of America catches a cold, Black folk end up with pneumonia. Medicaid sure needs strengthening, but it doesn't need cutting. In the states that have refused to accept Medicaid expansion, do you know that all of them, except for about 2, are southern states? Southern states, where large portions of Black community live, and they refuse to accept Medicaid expansion, hurting both poor Blacks and poor whites. All of these southern states, we must tell the truth. They want to cut food assistance. They are considering a long list of proposals that would cut hundreds of billions of dollars out of SNAP, not millions, billions of dollars over the next 10 years. The House budget resolution calls for $230 billion in cuts over the next 10 years. Remember what Isaiah said: woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights? Right now, these proposals could affect 40 million covered people. Watch this. In 2024, SNAP served 41 million people, 1 in 5 children. Of those who benefited, 37% are white, 26% are Black, 16% are Latinx, 3% are Asian, and 2% are Native American. We must tell the truth. They want to cut Head Start. Many of us don't remember that Head Start came out of the Poor People's Campaign after Dr. King had been killed. That was one of the things that they won that summer in '68. Head Start preschool serves about 650,000 children around the country. And recently, about 650,000 children around the country found they were locked out of a government website used to access grant funding. Many more children are in it than 650,000. The website went back online, but now some of them are still having problems. From 2020 to 2021, 37% of Head Starts were Latinx, 27% were Black, 24% were white, 3% were Native American. And the House budget resolution is calling for $300 billion in cuts over 10 years. We must tell the truth. You have to know the truth. If you don't know the truth, you're not going to understand why we have to be so serious about this resistance. in federal rental assistance. This program serves 5 million poor and low-income households, 69% of whom are children, older Americans, or people with disabilities. At a time of housing affordability crisis, this program is already vastly underfunded. Nearly 23 million low-income renters pay over half of their income on rent, subjecting them to the risk of eviction and homelessness. And just a few weeks ago or months ago, the Supreme Court ruled that you can't even sleep on a bench outside at night if you're homeless. The House budget resolution calls for $1 billion in cuts over 10 years. The truth is also that Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has said Republicans will not touch Social Security or Medicare. However, it's impossible to achieve Elon Musk's goal of $2 trillion in federal spending without going into Social Security and Medicare. You cannot do it. Social Security. In 2024, 68 million people received Social Security benefits. And in 2023, that program lifted 27.6 million people out of poverty. And Black folk, we need to remember that when Social Security was first put in place in 1954, we could not pay in for the most part, because the only people that were allowed to pay in were people that did not work in the agrarian culture or in the service culture, i.e. maids. They weren't allowed to pay in. In 1935. We were allowed to pay in 54, the same year as the Brown decision. So it was 19 years before many of our people could even pay into Social Security in the first place. And here we hear they want to go after Social Security. And as of 2021, 42% of Americans aged 56 to 64 had zero retirement account savings. Think about that. Upon retirement, many will be entirely reliant on Social Security, which paid an average monthly benefit of $1,800 a month. And this crowd is saying, in order to give more money to corporations, we're going to go after even Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, even though they're saying they won't, but there's no way they can't. In 2024, Medicare provided insurance for 61.2 million older Americans and people with disabilities. Cuts to this program would leave millions of seniors struggling even harder to pay their health care bill. And if by now where you're sitting, you're saying this word, damn, that's the word you should be saying. That's the word. The same word Jesus used when he saw that fig tree fronting. That's what you should be saying. They're that ruthless, that ruthless. In 2023, 1 in 4 Medicare beneficiaries lived on incomes below $21,000, while half lived on less than $36,000. People of color have lower median incomes in their retirement years than white Americans, reflecting racial discrimination in education and employment and lower access to pension benefits. And yet, they're going to go after Medicare. And the taxes and inequality in 2017, the Trump GOP tax law delivered huge windfalls to these rich and large corporations. And you know, the corporations said, if you give us a tax cut, we're going to invest it back into the American society. What they did was they used that money to buy their own stocks and propped up their own companies. And that first tax cut was more money transferred from poor and working folk than was transferred during the height of slavery. $2 trillion. The new House budget resolution calls for $4.5 trillion in tax cuts that will benefit the ultra wealthy. In the Republican-held Congress, they want to extend the 2017. Now, if they just did that, they want to do so much more. But if they just did that, the Joint Committee on Taxation estimates that it will cost $4 trillion in lost revenue over the next decade. The way that these people are moving, it could be possible for black folk and brown folk and progressive white folk to win offices and have the government to run, but not have any money to run it on. The benefits of this extension would amount to less than $1 a day for the bottom half of U.S. families, while the richest 0.1% of families would pocket an estimated $314,000 per year. This is the game that they're playing, and it is not a game. This group wants to go after child tax cut credit, even though we found that when you give child tax cut credit, they actually can relieve children from poverty. All the gains that we've seen in employment and wages, you've heard Roland talk about it, are now under threat as this Trump-Musk-Johnson administration and Republicans in the Congress push an economic agenda based on mass deportations, severe cuts to federal spending, and staffing at federal agencies. And you heard me say that their goal is to control 4,000 workers so that they can control 10 million workers. And when we talk about these cuts in the federal government and in the jobs, remember that decent job for black workers make up 18% of federal employees compared to 12% of their share of the total workforce. You have an administration where Scott Bessent, the President Trump's Treasury Secretary, and his Commerce Secretary, all said openly, with not a stutter, in their confirmation hearing that they did not support raising the minimum wage. The minimum wage has been stuck at $7.25 per hour since 2009. If you raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, 43% of black people would come out of poverty with one raise. But they say, if you make $7.25 per hour and you earn $15,080 a year, you're not poor. You're on the lower middle income. And so here we are. And if we don't raise the minimum wage, and if we don't start understanding in our civil rights organizations that you have to connect voting rights and wages. Remember Dr. King in 1965, the end of the Selma to Montgomery March, he said that the greatest fear of the racist oligarchs in this country was the fear of the masses of black people and the masses of poor white people coming together and forming a voting bloc that could fundamentally shift the economic architecture of this nation. They won't raise the minimum wage while more than 1 in 5 black and Hispanic children are poor. And these children are 3 times as likely to fall below the poverty line. Trump wasted no time going after labor. No time. He illegally removed the board chair of the National Labor Relations Board, basically shutting it down, making it so it didn't have a quorum. It's worth adding that the $290 million that Elon Musk paid to influence the 2024 election is on par with the NLRB's $299 million budget. Unions, we know down through life. We fought to get in union. I was telling Roland one day that in 1935, civil rights group and union folk came together to bridge the two, civil rights and unionism. And we wouldn't have some of the improved earnings and working conditions, what we have today, without the focus of unions. Those in unions, their wages are 13.5 times more than those who are non-union. This is the truth. And my friends, I know that sometimes we don't want to hear it and we want a cute bumper sticker or we want a rhyme. But these folk have a plan and it's very statistical. Just like Project 2025, it's written down. And you don't really know how big the fight is and how important the fight is unless you understand. Right now, they're talking about adding $345 billion in new spending to the Pentagon over the next 4 years. $150 billion spending to the Pentagon, $175 billion in mass deportations. And you say, well, Reverend Barber, so what does that have to do with anything? Because the Senate bill alone, $86 billion per year, would provide health insurance for all 4 million uninsured children. If we took that same money we could expand the enrollment in Head Start for 3.6 million children in poverty. If we took that same money, you could provide public housing for all 3.9 million families who receive eviction notices in a typical year. The truth is, when we look at this, this is a constitutional crisis, which has not been resolved by a system of checks and balances. In violation of the law, Donald Trump and Musk and Johnson are abusing the power of the presidency. They're abusing it by allowing Elon Musk to freeze funding allocated by Congress. The courts have issued injunctions against these illegal acts, but Trump and Musk are defying the rule of law. While Congress has a responsibility to check this abuse of power, it has instead invited its rogue executive to address a joint session of Congress while instructing its committees to prepare a budget based on the same lies that have been used to justify the illegal funding freeze. We must be clear in this confession about the state of our union. Our moral ejection is not about personality. It ain't about style. It's not about political opinions. It's about the size of a government. It's not about the size of a government. It is about the tyranny of technology and our refusal to bow to the God of efficiency, because the distorted faith violates our moral commitment to equality and freedom that an imperfect government was fashioned to sustain. If people's lives and livelihoods can be dismissed as waste without due process, we forsake our moral commitments to equality. So we refuse to bow, because if an unelected technocrat can delete the financial commitments of a government established of and for by the people, we betray our moral commitments if we bow to that. Who knew that one person could give out all your information? That one person could walk in one office and tell one person to push one button and they had access to all of your information, and could then probably on the back end make it so that even if they give the information back, they still have access to it. We refuse to bow, because if political leaders are willing to forsake their oath to establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility in order to appease billionaires, if we bow, we reject our faith and the moral foundations of our common life. We refuse to bow because if Congress does not stand by our commitments to partners and vulnerable neighbors around the world, we will abandon the moral foundations of the fragile peace we hope to sustain. We have to refuse to bow. And the truth is, when and if our political leaders have bowed to fear, to the tyranny of technology, to greed, to supremacy, in doing so, they no longer represent us. A Yale professor just last week said Trump is no longer the president because every day he has violated his oath of office. And so tonight, my family, we who believe in love, justice, and freedom must declare that we are not afraid of the false god of efficiency. We must declare we are not afraid of lies. We're not afraid of greed. We're not afraid of injustice. We're not afraid of religious and white supremacy. And we must declare that bowing down is not an option. It's not in our spiritual or historical DNA. We will not bow to any tyranny that claims that they have control of our common life, because we know that the people of our communities have power. We actually have power to reclaim our moral commitments. We have power, and it's going to take time, and it will take, but it begins by telling the truth. In South Africa, they used to say, only a dying mule kicks the hardest. Langston Hughes used to say that we must take back our mighty dream again. America's never been America to me, but I swear this oath that America will be. We have power. Did you know Trump, with all their money, won in the battleground states by a total of around 800,000 votes? But in those same states, millions of black people and brown people and poor and working white didn't even vote. And if we begin to organize now for 2026 and move and inspire and unite those votes, we can shake the power of this nation. And we have to, because bowing down is not an option. We must reclaim our government. We must reclaim pledging ourselves to the reconstructing of America. We must call on lifting every voice to sing. In 1850, the Dred Scott decision came down, Barbara, and it was a low-down decision. It was a low-down president and a low-down Supreme Court and a low-down Congress. And after the Supreme Court was stacked with slave owners, and they codified white supremacy into law with the Dred Scott decision, and they declared that Chief Justice Taney, who was rushed onto the Supreme Court, he gave in to the slave masters and ruled on the Dred Scott decision, saying that black folk in America didn't have any rights that white people were honored and bound to respect. And in the midst of that, one of the sisters of the movement saw Frederick Douglass depressed, and she asked Frederick one question: is God dead? Are you gonna trust Taney? Are you gonna trust God? Frederick Douglass said it shook him to his core. He said he had to speak. Got in a speaking engagement with the abolition group and said to them, earth and heaven will despise this edict of Taney. And I want my people to know, he said, as he talked to them, as monstrous as this moment appears, as monstrous as this decision appears, we can meet it in a cheerful spirit, because this very attempt to blot out forever the hopes of an enslaved people may be the one necessary link in the chain of events preparatory to the downfall and the complete overthrow of the entire slave system. Then he said, the whole history of the anti-slavery movement is studied with proof that all measures devised and executed with a view to allow and diminish the anti-slavery agitation has only served every time to increase, intensify, and embolden our agitation. My brothers and sisters, justice-loving Americans, black folk, folk of conscience wherever you are, if Frederick Douglass, an abolitionist, could refuse to bow down in the 1850s, then surely we must declare now that bowing down is not an option. They are afraid of you. They are afraid of your votes. They would not be working this hard to suppress you if they were not afraid. Trump and Musk, even the filing of executive orders is proof of fear, because they know they could never get it passed through the Congress. They are afraid. Their crowd is afraid. They are afraid of the power of love, the power of truth, the power of justice, the power of unity. They are all scared of our power, but they are betting that you will be afraid of them. But this is the time, as Frederick said, to increase, intensify, and embolden our agitation, and to declare that wanting to be a king or want to be king is only a king if we bow down. That's the only way it can be a king, is if we bow down. But bowing down is not an option. My knees and your knees are not made for bowing to a power-drunk neo-fascist. We bow only to God. Otherwise, we stand tall. When they attack everyday people with bad, mean, hurtful policies, we must stand tall and increase and intensify and embolden our agitation and say no. It's time for our pulpits to stand tall, to call on the people to increase, intensify, and embolden our agitation and declare not on our watch. In our protests, we must stand tall and increase, intensify, and embolden our agitation. If black and white folk and women and gay and straight and Christian and Jews and Muslims and Unitarian could do it 60 years ago in Selma, if they could stand tall and advance and never sound retreat, then surely we can stand tall now and intensify and increase and embolden our agitation. We must do it in our organizing. We've got to increase and intensify and embolden our agitation. We've got to stand tall, because bowing down is not an option. It may take mass call-ins, but we've got to increase, intensify, and embolden our agitation and stand tall. It may take mass nonviolent sit-ins. It may take mass pray-ins. It may take labor striking on election days to ensure that all the workers are out getting people to the poll. But that's all right. Whatever it takes, we've got to increase, intensify, and embolden our agitation. It may take massive lawsuits and class action lawsuits of the people, but we've got to stand tall. And if we stand tall, their plans won't work. As long as we stick together and stand tall in every precinct, stand tall in every voting district, stand tall in every city, stand tall in every state, stand tall, because what has been created and done can be undone. If we stand in the truth, stand in love, stand in justice, the God of the universe will be with us and change will come. Because when we stand with God's truth and God's love and God's justice, I learned this a long time ago. One can chase 1,000 and two can put 10,000 to flight. Because when we stand with God's truth and God's love, dark Fridays, mean political Fridays can become new Sunday mornings of mercy and righteousness. But when we stand with God's truth and love, ashes of repentance can become great moments of renewal. It's time, y'all. It's time, family. Wherever you are, sitting with a family out there in a church, sitting in your living room, thank God you're hearing this tonight. The lies and the greed cannot have the last word. It's time to increase workers' protests. People can put together their lawsuits. We can do all the kinds of ends we need to do because we love justice and we love righteousness and we hate injustice. We may have to do it all. I suspect we will. I suspect and prophesy tonight that when it gets warmer, you may see in America the same thing you saw in Egypt and places. You may see a fresh freedom summer, organic, just coming up. Because there comes a time, as Dr. King reminded us, people just get tired. Get tired. If they tell you as a worker, you got to leave your job illegally, why don't you just sit there, make them arrest you, and then file a lawsuit against us? Somewhere I read, like Dr. King, we got the right to freedom of speech, we got the right to assembly, we got the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have all these rights. It's time now to believe it, stand on it, believe it, don't back up from it. We in this moment must use every moral tool at our disposal and every nonviolent method to embolden and intensify our agitation for love and justice and righteousness. Stand up in every pulpit. Stand in every federal job. Stand and protest and expose what they're doing. Stand with every American, no matter who they are. If they believe in one nation under God, indivisible, with life, liberty, and justice for all, stand with them. Flood the congressional phone lines. Flood them with calls of protest and moral dissent. Stand up in the town halls. Go to their offices. Stand with facts and with faith. Stand and don't bow down and declare that as long as you got breath in your body, as long as you clothe in your right mind, as long as you have a portion of health and strength, because you care about this generation and the generation behind you, stand up, because God can do more with the remnant that will stand than a crowd that will bow. Stand, stand, and don't let anything keep you from standing, because bowing down is not an option now. God bless you. And Lord help America.
I told y'all when we were doing this, I said why we were not going to carry the lies of Donald Trump, and he's still lying right now. And I said that we need to hear the state of our union from Reverend Dr. William Barber. That was so on point. It was so unnecessary. We've got a full house of folks joining us virtually. Reverend Frederick Douglass Haynes, the Third Friendship West Baptist Church out of Dallas. My dear Alpha brother, glad to have you here. Pastor Robert Turner is still with us. We're going to get Pastor Tony Lee back on the phone in the studio. We've got Dr. Greg Carr, Department of African American Studies at Howard University. We've got Dr. Nola Haynes, Georgetown. Yeah, calm down. First of all, don't you even start. Don't you even start when Reverend Parker was over there preaching. You were over here giggling and laughing.
That was Greg's
So don't
fault.
start. We got Judith Brown. Brown Diana's director of the Advancement Project. We got Eugene Craig, who is a distressed Republican. We got Therese Garnier. She, of course, she served in the military. I know she's got something to say about the craziness that we're seeing from these folks. Randy Bryant, DEI disruptor, joining us. Jelena Turner, Jelena Porter, formerly of the State Department. Of course, Pastor Lamar's here as well. We're going to have CBC members. Y'all, we're going to show y'all the moment when my alpha brother, Congressman Al Green, stood up and walked the hell out of Donald Trump's speech. We'll do that in a second, but I'm just going to just quickly go around, folks. Freddie, I'm going to start it with you. The word that Reverend Barber gave us, the direction that he gave us, just give us just your thoughts, because that was something that we needed to hear, because so many people have been crying out saying, man, I just want something to happen. What do I do? Where do I start? Go ahead and kick us off.
Yeah, well, Roland, first of all, I want to thank you because you are modeling what we need to be doing in this hour. What you're doing basically is applying what? Kujichagulia, self-determination. We can speak for ourselves. That's how the Black press was born. And so I want to thank you for that. But also, we can pay our own way. If we do this, then we can also have our own message. Tonight, whatever mess was going on Capitol Hill, as you said, returning to the scene of the crime, that was a state of dissing the union. And tonight we heard from Bishop Barber a real state of the union, a real vision for where we need to go and how we can get there. And so I want to salute Bishop Barber for his prophetic witness. You heard tonight what real theology sounds like and looks like. Roland, you asked in the earlier session about, what the Black church needs to be doing. First of all, we need to get rid of white Jesus and embrace fully Black liberation theology, a theology that liberates and empowers. As long as we got white Jesus, it's going to be hell for Black people. And so what William Barber did tonight was basically articulate a theology of liberation. And then in the spirit of Sankofa, he reached back to what Dr. King had been telling us as he was being assassinated and still speaks to this day. And that is, number one, understand that the demonic triplets of this country are now at work as never before. Racism, militarism, and economic exploitation and the greed of capitalism. And so when William Barber brings back to the front of the stage our responsibility to the poor, our responsibility to those who are suffering and struggling the most. After all, this nation calls itself about God and Jesus. Well, Jesus said in the end, he's going to judge nations by how they treat the least of these. And right now it's going to sound like he's going to say, I was hungry, but you cut SNAP benefits. I was thirsty, and you had contaminated water in Flint, Michigan, as well as Seagoville, Texas, not to mention Jackson, Mississippi. I was in prison because of your prison industrial complex, and I was a stranger of color, and you did all you could to keep me out so you can go to hell. And the country is going to say, when Jesus, he's going to say, how you treat the least of these is what you've done to me. So Bishop Barber tonight reconnected us with the militancy of Martin Luther King Jr., gave us a vision of where it is we need to go. And now we got one responsibility, and that is to agitate, educate, legislate. And when we put together education, agitation, legislation, it's going to bring about the transformation of this country. And so here it is. As far as I'm concerned, William Barber just told us Freedom Summer 2025 has got to be what we are about.
Pastor Kenneth Whalum.
Economic empowerment, again, long game. Montgomery Boyce bus boycott 381 days, it achieved the end that it was intended to achieve. Our mayor here in Memphis has challenged Black pastors to take a year, starting March 18th, select a Black-owned business in your neighborhood or in your congregation, patronize that business on one day of the month or one day of the week. In 365 days, we are going to transform the economy of Memphis, Tennessee. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound man. Sound man gives us strategy. Every pastor on this panel, every pastor watching, among the 245,000 or so people we got watching, you can mobilize your congregation to implement a boycott in reverse. We ain't talking about not spending money with white folk, although we are, but we are focusing and being intentional on spending our dollars with Black-owned businesses starting March 18th.
Let's go to Baltimore, Pastor Turner. You're up.
Yes, sir. So the speech was very empowering for me. One thing that faith leaders, we know how to do is, reading from our text, we know how to deal with kings. And we have a person occupying the White House who really doesn't want to be president. He wants to be king. And he's trying to act as though he is already king. Unfortunately for him, he's not a king. He's not even the president, really. He is not even the vice president. In my opinion, Elon Musk is acting president, and Vladimir Putin is the vice president, and Donald Trump is like the court jester. He's the joke, trying to assume powers of a king. But our faith teaches us that when we are encountering king-like personalities, that we have to mobilize and organize and activate. And that's one of the major things I really appreciate about Reverend Barbara's speech is talking to us in a language in which we all understand, but challenging the faith community and people of faith in general to take direct action and be willing to put their lives on the line. And that's something that personally I identify with, even with my monthly walks from Baltimore to the White House, because it is time for us to stop just talking and stop just singing and preaching, but time for us to take action.
Pastor Lamar, I said on this show a couple of weeks ago that what is required now are modern day Nehemiahs to rebuild the wall of resistance. And what I said on the show was that the beauty of Nehemiah having the vision, but he took it to the people. Then the people said, let us rebuild. Because so the people are a part of this. We got up to almost 250,000 folks watching live simultaneously. And what I'm trying to challenge them is, this is not just about what preachers are supposed to do, what civil rights organizations and others. No, we need the people to say, let us rebuild.
Right. You know, in the moment of rebuilding, they had tools of building in one hand and the implements of war in another. And what I keep thinking about now is
because there were haters saying, y'all ain't gonna let y'all finish this wall.
Oh, exactly. And they were designing death upon the people. So what I continue to think about is a song that we would sing growing up. He's a battle axe in the time of a battle and a shelter in the time of a storm. We have to be on war footing now. This is not going away. We came here loving and we came here fighting. If we're going to stay here, we must do both. Now, what you're doing with this media, with Black-owned media, you're taking us back to the best of the tradition of Black media. So from the mid-19th century up into the 1920s and 30s, we used the Black media to find each other. Mothers would write saying, I have not seen my son. Sons and daughters would write, I have not seen my father. We connected with one another and built loving environments that sustained us. We have to remember that there is something in them. I think Frances Cress Welsing was right in her assessment of this sense of something genetic that makes you want to put out the fire of love and joy. All we have to do is be beautiful, and they visit violence upon us. But what we do is we keep being beautiful. We keep being wonderful and extraordinary. And I really believe the only hope, Dr. Carr is right, this empire, there's something we'd say in the South when people are dying, it's called the death rattle. you can hear the American empire death rattle. Donald Trump is that rattling. Donald Trump is mucus in the lungs of the body politic, struggling for oxygen. We need to understand, though, that some things must die so that life can come. My grandfather told me when he was approaching death, I was sitting with him, he said, boy, when the fruit gets ripe, it falls from the tree. But what he also understood is that he had planted seeds, so we may not see him physically, but we would keep coming up, doing his work, cultivating, growing. That's what we've got to do. This is death. This is weakness. We know it, they know it. The question is, will we live into something different? And will we be prepared for the opposition? We must never, ever believe again that they let anything slide without a backlash. We think that we have won and they are circling wagons again. So we've got to continue to love each other and continue to fight, continue to be human, and let none of what they do or say take that away from us.
Judith, that was New York Times had a piece.
That's right, man.
Yes, sir. The New York Times had a story. They followed 11 Black folks, and they talked to a sister. Her last name was Wilder. She was a public school classroom aide. So this is what they wrote. Miss Wilder, a Democrat, said that she's in Milwaukee, said that she didn't vote because she believed that Mr. Trump was going to win. Now she is preparing for what she believes he will do in office, in food assistance, Social Security, and housing assistance, among other programs for the poor. Quote, I already know that everything is about to end, so I've been trying to get myself together and look for better paying jobs, Ms. Wilder said. Racism was here before I was born. The battle I choose is employment. Can we get more pay? I work in the public schools and I make $17 an hour. That's not enough. Her name is Keosha Wilder. She's 39 years old. And I'm sitting here going, I didn't vote because I thought he was going to win. Baby, you in a battleground state.
That's right.
And that was part of the problem. There were too many folk who thought the same thing, and then by not voting, they made sure he was going to win.
Sitting back. I mean, it don't make no sense, right? There's no logic behind that. You know, to sit back and not participate in an election where fascism and authoritarianism is on the ballot is crazy talk. Now, for some people were hoodwinked, some people were bamboozled, others just tuned out and let this go. But I think Reverend Barber, you know, reminds us that first, when he talked about a king, he's telling us that in order for there to be a king, people have to bow down. Sitting on the sidelines and not voting is bowing down. It's capitulating to what is to come. And for people to sit out when we are people that don't bow down. In order to be a king, for someone to be a king, that means that there are subjects. The people who were once considered chattel in this country will never be subjects again. And so for us to think about this moment, we have to do what he said. Reverend Barber talked about, we're gonna litigate, lawyers like me, we're gonna go to court, et cetera. But I always say, the revolution will not be litigated because these courts are not our courts. This law is not our law, but the difference is going to be whether or not we are going to stand up. We are gonna, 92% sisters, oh, we on vacation. Get your ass off vacation right about now.
Yes, sir.
Because we don't have time for that. We have to be in the streets. We have to be organizing. We have to be advocating. We do have to be suing, and we have to be voting. That sister did the FAFO, whatever that thing is.
FAFO.
And now figuring out that lives are on the line. And you sat home and you sitting with the guilt of that. Never again.
You talk about a king. Now, Freddie Haynes accuses me of encroaching upon the territory of preachers. I told him that ain't what I do. But when called, I'm gonna do what I have to do. Jelena, I did a segment on this show where I said, America wanted a king, you got a king. But I have to remind people in 1 Samuel, when the people of Israel said, God, we want a king. He's like, hold up, y'all got me. No, we want a king. He went, I'm gonna give you a king, but I'm gonna tell you what the king is gonna do. He told them in advance how evil the king was going to be, and they still wanted one. These fools out here, they said in advance what they were gonna do. So all is crying now. I'm like, hold on, y'all wanted a king. Now y'all got him. So these farmers in Kansas, in Texas, who are mad about losing $2 billion in USAID money. These other folk, veterans who voted for Trump, now whining and crying. I saw some guy on Wall Street say he voted 3 times. This was not what we voted for. There was a teacher in Kentucky. She said, this is not what we voted for. No, boo. The king told y'all what he was going to do. Now they all of a sudden regretting it. But our whole deal is, as Reverend Barber said, we can't bow down in this moment, and we can't bow out. Speak to that.
I think, well, that's a lot. So let's unpack that, okay? First of all, the Trump campaign, that's what they did. They campaigned on cacophony. They campaigned on confusion. They campaigned on chaos, right? So they said, hey, all we have to do is manipulate. We're going to tell you we're going to do all these things and then focus on what we're going to do in the background. So, for instance, right now, Trump has put us in the middle of a trade war. He has stopped military funding for Ukraine and obviously dismantled USAID, among other things. But remember when he was talking about taking over Greenland and Panama Canal? Like, what happened to all that, right? Just noise and talk. But if that's how a king acts, that's what they want. That's what they got and they voted for. And the young lady we're talking about, she's not the only one we've seen. There were a lot more people who actually did go out and vote for Trump, and lots of white people, to be frank. And they're like, listen, they've radicalized me now because I don't have access to IVF or whatever the stories are. But I think what we've done, obviously, there's been a dangerous precedent. And obviously, we've seen or we've heard in some of the speech tonight, we've had one of our own CBC members who left her, I think, got kicked out of the room for disobedience. And I want to go back to something that
Congressman Al Green, we're going to show
Al
it.
Green.
And he stood up and said, shame on all y'all.
Right. But I want to go back to something that Congressman Carter said earlier. And I can appreciate it because I like that we have kind of the inside-outside baseball with some of our CBC members. We had some who were like, listen, I'm just not going to go.
Also, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett walked out.
And we love her too. But we also have members like him who are like, I'm not going to let this wannabe king, even Elon Musk, little baby, said, hey, you're not the president, right? He got told by a little child, you're not the president. I'm not going to let this man.
Shut your mouth.
Shut your mouth. I'm not going to let him scare me out of doing my job that I got elected to do. And for those of us in this room who have been the first or the only in all white or spaces that don't look like us, you need to be there to make yourself seen and to make them be uncomfortable. Because Trump shouldn't be able to go there and think like, I'm just talking to my homies and this is what I'm gonna do. He needs to see us. We need to be there and be present and make our presence known.
Therese, 30% of the federal government are veterans. And Lord, a lot of them who voted for Trump, now they crying because they getting laid off. And I'm sitting here going, he didn't love veterans. That man don't care. He skipped out on the war and he said, what did he say? He said, trying to avoid STDs was his personal Vietnam. That's literally what that fool said. And so he didn't. So all these people who fell for that nonsense, he didn't love the military. Now they learning.
Yeah, they learning real quick. There's 3 issues that I take with the felon in chief. First and foremost, this war that he's causing with our allies. He's putting military service members in danger by doing this. They're already saying they're not going to refuel our carriers. Okay, that's just step 1. Okay, secondly, all these veterans that are complaining, we voted for him and we're, how could he do this to us? You knew what was coming. He's been saying this. Even
for the folks at home, you served. How long did you serve?
I served a total of 7.5 years.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Air Force and then National Guard. So you have these individuals who voted for him who say, oh, we didn't expect him to do this, but he's been saying this. As service members or as military, if our commander in chief says they're going to do something, we're going to assume that they're going to do it. So for them to come back and say, well, we didn't think it was going to be this bad. No, the issue was you didn't think it would impact you.
Boom.
Yes.
You did not think it would impact you. So that's my third issue that comes up. Now we have veterans who did not vote for him, including myself, who are now being fired, who can't get health care, who are having all these other issues, who served their country valiantly, honorably. And now we have to fight for health care somewhere else because
And they're doing massive cuts to the VA.
The
They're looking
VA
at cutting benefits as well. And so all the Republicans, they all been lying about how much they love the military.
Absolutely,
They
absolutely.
love to send troops to war, but not take care of them when they're at home.
They like the idea of it. They like to claim that they're patriotic, but they don't follow up with it. And Trump, throughout his first presidency, he made fun of different service members who were held as prisoners of war. I mean, he has time and time again shown that he does not respect the military. And yet we have service members and veterans who still voted for him. And now they're crying. And I see these posts all the time. And I'll comment and say, you know what? As a service member myself, I don't feel, or as a former service member myself, I don't feel sorry for your situation because we tried to tell you, but you didn't care because you didn't think it impacted you. And now it does. And so now we're in this predicament that now we have to try to rally them all together. And we still got veterans who are saying they still support him after being fired by him. I don't understand that. But, you know, at this point, I'm just praying that people will start getting some common sense and start fighting back, whether it's through words, whether it's showing up and protesting. This being nice and sending letters and roo rah rah, that's not going to do it anymore. And as someone that's in the military, we believe in force if needs be. So some people need to be thinking, what do we need to do to make sure our voices are heard?
No, that was a Democratic group who released some research and data that they were sending around. And let's just be real clear, that data was to appease the white people. And one of the things that they said in there was, hey, you know, don't really bring up USAID, don't really bring up Doge because that's popular among a lot of people. But the USAID, the reason that's important because the reality is folk are about to die. They've already died.
Yeah.
And I've specifically been calling out these fake conservative evangelicals because these fake evangelicals ain't saying nothing about folks dying. So I'm like, oh, I thought y'all were pro-life.
Right.
And the reason folk need to stop acting like USAID is because these people run around and say, well, we should stop spending money abroad. There's a reason we do that. Because that also plays, that's called the soft part of diplomacy, as opposed to the hard part, which utilizing troops. You start doing that, you're about to really open the door for Russia, for China, but also for ISIS and the recalibration of Al Qaeda.
Absolutely. You know, diplomacy first, right? And first and foremost, I want to say that thank you for your service, I feel is empty. But as a national security foreign policy person, both of my parents were in the military, including the Air Force. And a lot of my work includes military folks. I truly admire the sacrifice that you all make for this country. And what is happening now to veterans boils my blood. My mother, who just died a year ago, was 100% disabled because she was injured when she was in the military. And that is how she lived. That is the money that she lived on because she was unable to work. And to hear veterans, you already kind of have to tussle with the VA like it's a dance. It's a whole nother language that you learn. So it was already a very interesting system to kind of navigate. But now it is virtually impossible for people who serve this country with their body, bones, and blood to recoup any benefits from serving their country. So I just want to say that first and foremost. In terms of our adversaries now, allies, threats, real threats around the world that are looking at us, they have been literally watching their little clocks like, okay, we're going to see which way this is going to go. And one of the things that I think about a great deal is that we are definitely open to kinetic attack. We are open to extreme espionage. The workers who were let go, they are rightfully angry. How do you handle a group of folks who know things?
There was a report that Russia and China said, oh, they are targeting
That's what I'm saying.
disgruntled federal workers.
Yes.
Let me tell you something. The people historically in this country that have spied against this country were mad about not getting a job promotion or feeling left behind. How do you think American federal workers feel today about their government right now right here and now, right? How do you think people feel right now? And you know, this entire, I say this thing where none of this is sustainable, and it isn't. You know, you are firing people, you're not paying attention to what office, expenditures, you're not doing this carefully line by line. You are taking a hacksaw, and not are you only doing that, but then you are also sullying these people's reputations so they cannot get work after this. You are saying that they had poor performances. That is how people go into the world after their federal government stints and get other paying jobs, is by their job performance. What do you get out of firing people and then cutting off their ways to get future employment? How evil, how cruel must you be? And when I think about what Reverend Barbara was saying tonight, and you know, I sit here wearing multiple hats, and right now I'm gonna dive into my MDiv hat a little bit. And what I want to urge is, when we are talking about the very crucial moment that we are in now, and we are talking about Black coalitions. I'm a Black Catholic, born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. Hey, 3 million of us, 3 million, including not just folks from Louisiana and Maryland and Baltimore, but also our diaspora brothers and sisters, right? And then also there are 2% of the Muslim Black population. We are talking about almost 10% of other faiths that need to be part of this conversation. That's just something that's really important to me, because we are often left out of these conversations. And I know the Black church plays such a huge role in what we are doing, but this is all hands on deck.
As another Black Catholic, I second that.
Hey.
We got some inclusion here.
Well, first of all, I was born and raised in the Black church.
We know, Sebastian.
Let me clear. I was born and raised in the Black Catholic church. Black Catholic churches are part of the Black church. Black Catholic churches were more Black church than Catholic.
Yeah.
Let's just be real clear. Our lady started to see Catholic Church in Houston.
Okay, I'll say but we don't.
No, baby, because see, that Catholic church was founded in my grandparents' living room.
Watch out now. What those priests at?
Was founded in their living
What those
room.
priests at?
Clarence and Imelda Lamont.
And those nuns.
That was a
nuns
Black
go hard too.
Catholic church.
Nuns go hard too.
Right. No, that's right. Randy, in Trump's lying speech, of course, they yell, "Merit is back," which is hilarious, because he didn't introduce some of these grossly unqualified people in his cabinet. But the thing, we played a video yesterday where there was a sister who started crying. She was the chair of a water board, and she started crying. So two engineering degrees, all these different degrees, because this white Republican was jamming her up on DEI, and she had to take a while to collect herself. And I understand. I said, I'm not talking to you. I said, but damn that, I'm not letting these white racists break our folk down and cry. We got to understand, it's a bunch of grossly unqualified, can't do any of these jobs, white folks. And so when Trump stands up there and the rest of them yell, holler, and scream, who's not qualified, they yell DEI, but that plane crashed with 67 folks died. Then when they find out all the pilots were white on the plane and a helicopter, all of a sudden the story went away. But this is a moment where we got to just learn how to tell some folk, y'all can kiss my ass. I'm not about to sit here and defend my integrity and my academic pedigree with some folks who can't even carry a lot of our suitcases.
I know people are very offended by what's happening with DEI, and I understand why the sister broke down and cried. But this is it, that we should feel so incredibly complimented. The fact that here we are brought over here as property, that we were, raped and used, and these people have 400 years ahead of us. And to create some initiatives, something aspirational to say, we're going to create some diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to give other people a chance. Now, let's just be really clear. It wasn't just for Black people, but I know that they marketed it as such because they knew that people would accept the ripping apart of it if it weren't about Black people, right? And so the fact that that's all we've had, I mean, everything else has literally been us by our grit. They gave us, you know, the worst vegetable at the time, and we made collard greens. They gave us the innards of the pig, and we, you know, we made chitlins. Like, we have always made something out of nothing. And then we have these initiatives to say, hey, let's just be aspirational to have a diverse workforce, because the world is changing anyway. Let's have pay equity, maybe pay people the same for what they're doing. Let's make it where everybody feels included in this workforce. And they're so threatened. They're so threatened and scared of us. The little bit they gave, they said, we're gonna wipe it away. Should be a huge compliment to us. I don't even know how we made it this far with nothing, to be honest with you. We are miraculous. You know, so there's a video going around saying that Black people are walking miracles, and indeed each of us one is. Everyone watching today is. So I understand right now that it is frustrating. But what I will say is that they can't stop the world from being diverse. The numbers are going to be the numbers.
White folks ain't about to have that many new.
They can't, right. So we're going to be here.
They ain't going to have time to go to work if they're going to be screwing that much.
Right? And we are, not going to stop being great. We're not going to stop being who we are. As you've seen what has been happening, here you have this I can't even call it administration. The circus has come to town and the clowns have rolled out. And you still see with all these that Black people are still just doing their thing.
We are.
And so, you know, listen to Reverend Barber today when he said that we can't sit this out. We never have. And even when we talk about the 92% and the 88% kind of chilling, I don't really know any of us who are. I think what we're doing is what we've done tonight, and is that we are hyper-focusing on each other right now. We tried to get everybody, we tried to tell everyone, come on, y'all, this is the way we got to vote. This will help all of us. But they didn't listen. And so I think right now we are gathering our nuts, right? And we are preparing for the winter, because we know sometimes it's going to be a little dark and cold, but we got this. Because we've always had this. We've always had it. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, people ask me, what do I think is going to happen? It will be renamed.
It will. Yeah.
It will be renamed, rebranded, but you can't wipe it away.
Eugene, we are not seeing profiles of courage from Republicans. And I'm laughing how now they are trying to avoid town halls because folks are kicking their behind.
It's scary.
It's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot more of these people kicking their behind because when they watch all this shit, like Trump still running his mouth, still talking, and all he's doing is constantly lying the whole time.
That's crazy.
Look, they about to they F around. They about to find out, and they are finding out.
And real time. Look, you're dealing with a party. You're dealing with people that, first and foremost, let's go back about 15 years. A lot of them came to power via town halls. They came to power during the Tea Party wave. So you're dealing with people that are literally, and I like to sort of go, we can quote, baptized in fear. You know, they're fearful of Elon Musk. They're fearful of Trump. They're fearful of their own voters. You know, the fact that the NRCC is telling their members, do not talk to your voters is literally nuts. And it's because they understood. Look, in 2010, you had, Freedom Works, which was down the street from here at the time. You had Heritage, you had Groundswell, you had a lot of these organizations coming together and literally funding the Tea Party movement. They're saying, hey, these are fake protesters, because at the time when Democrats had town halls around Obamacare and the stimulus package, they planted fake protesters and then sent Fox News out to cover the fake protesters. So in their mind, when they see real protests, they're thinking it's fake protests, when in reality, you have disgruntled federal employees that were illegally, per federal judge, laid off from their job. You have, cities and states and localities that are going to be affected by budget slashes. Speaker Johnson now is terrified that they may not be able to get Trump's package or agenda done because he's going to need Democrat votes.
They won't.
You already lost Massey. Massey's gone. So you lose another one, it's a wrap.
That's right.
So the thing is this, right? I think Democrats, are in a unique situation. I say this as a Republican, a unique situation. You're in where Republicans were in 2009. But Republicans made a decision to do everything in their power to stop Barack Obama. Democrats have to make a decision to do everything in their power to stop Donald Trump. These special elections that are coming up, get ready and prepare for them. Hey, guess what? If Elise Stefanik gets appointed to UN ambassador, her district's borders Canada. Doug Ford said today, listen, you give us a tariff, your electricity gonna be cut off.
Yeah.
Right.
You know who district borders that? At least Phonics.
Right.
You just had a Democrat win in Iowa in the R24 district. So my thing is this, you know, you're dealing with the party baptized in fear. We're literally right now, you know, Padme said, Revenge of the Sith, that, you know, the Republic dies to, well, with thunderous applause, and this we're seeing right now with this address to the joint session of Congress. But, you know, there's always new hope. You know, we're hoping tomorrow, hurry up. But in order to get there, folk got to fight like hell.
You know, Greg, if that was a moment, I think back to the massive Black Lives Matter protests. In May 25th will mark the 5th anniversary of the death of George Floyd. You referenced earlier how Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk and these white boys, they want Derek Chauvin to get a pardon. Sorry, fool, he got convicted in state court. And so ain't no Republican governor in Minnesota, and Trump, you ain't got no control over state. And you can see who they want to be as their leaders, as their martyrs. They bring back the Tate brothers, so you know, charged with sex trafficking, hailing them up as their heroes. And what I'm saying, you know, to the folks, a lot of those folks who were protesting on college campuses, other places for Gaza, where y'all go? To the Black Lives Matter folk, I'm like, if there's a moment for you to come back and hit the streets, this is it. The earlier panel was right. Public pressure, pressure in the streets has an impact on court cases, on public opinion.
That's right.
But folks staying quiet gives the impression that everybody is good with it. And so I don't think folk can be quiet about this moment. There should be massive protests in cities all across this country saying, hell no, we're not accepting this.
Right.
Of course, I agree. You know, Reverend Barber laid it out, and it was interesting as he was talking and looking at Trump, the parallels, community, nation, identity, everything on the other side, rage, lies. And, you know, there was a long article in the New York Times Magazine this weekend by David Leonhardt about Denmark, most progressive country in the world, arguably. Social welfare, college all the way through graduate school. And the one area that they're criticized on is immigration. They are very intolerant of immigration. But the idea is that they have a culturally homogenous society. So the idea is that because they come out of the same culture, generally speaking, people are willing to buy into something where those who have more money will take a little bit off to take care of everybody else. That is not the situation here. And that's why this country will collapse. Because what Reverend Barber was talking about is something they don't understand. There is no common culture in this country.
Right.
So when you quote Abraham Lincoln to them, they think, what the hell are you talking about? And I must, you know, again, thinking about what you just did, Reverend Lamar, that's the kind of theology that we brought on those boats with us. I don't call it Christian, I don't call it Muslim or Jew, that's African spirituality. That was the basis of Vodun, the Haitian Revolution, that was the basis of Nat Turner, that was the basis of Harriet Tubman. And I'm saying, you have to understand there's no common culture here. What we saw tonight, and he's still talking, that looked like Leni Riefenstahl, Triumph of the Will, the Nuremberg rallies of 1934 with Hitler, who was a Christian